Back here for part 2. Now, the most used commodity money appeared separately around the world, and this I find fascinating, how separate societies who were not in communication with one another tended to adopt gold as their form of money, and it was done independently. Now, to me, gold is something that's kind of strange because you can't eat it, can't really wear it. It does have some industrial uses, which is more so than in the past. I mean, back in, say, 1420, gold had very little commercial use in terms of industrial use. But gold does have some properties that humans like. It's shiny. It's easy to make things out of. It's sort of soft. It doesn't tarnish. It remains in the same form no matter what you do to it. Ships that went down in, say, 1700s, they're brought back up again in modern times, and the gold on those ships looks the same as the day it went down under the water. And so gold became a form of power, prestige, religious authority. The color resembled the sun, so Egyptians associated that with their sun god. In around 3000 BC, gold ingots were used as a medium of exchange for the first time, and then it kind of morphed into coins. Now, gold does have some desirable qualities. It is durable. Again, it lasts forever. Divisible, you can make smaller coins out of it, smaller denominational coins, and it is relatively scarce, which all it's all useful for its store of value. But gold is not perfect. It's not standardized. Again, I talked about the fact that people walk in with gold nuggets. You don't know what that is, and so then you have to get that gold nuggets assessed. It's also not that portable. A few coins is fine, but if you want to take your gold in to buy or to pay a large amount of money, it's kind of heavy. It's kind of large. It's hard to hide. It can be stolen. And therefore, that is a downside to gold. Now, one way to standardize it, again, when I talked about monarchs, was to make coins out of it. And right here, these are the first coins. These were done in Lydia, which is modern-day Western Turkey. And this is around 600 BC. And these became a very useful form of money. And ever since then, city-states, nations, they would coin their own coins, and they would circulate as a form of money. And people would accept them because they believed this had money. So even though gold is a commodity, it's not like bread. I actually would prefer bread because I can eat it. But as long as people believe gold has value in itself, then this whole thing works. And people do. I mean, people today, they think gold has all this great value. They ask them why, they really don't know. But again, as long as people believe it has value, it has value. Now, as your textbook mentions, there's a term called currency debasement. Your textbook was talking about creating too much currency, and that leads to inflation. The way they debase currency in coins was simply the monarchs, what they would do is they would put less gold or silver into the coin than what they say it is. And so they would mix it with less valuable metals, nickel, copper, things like that, but they would tell you it's all gold. And that would lead, and people would understand that, and so they would have a different hierarchy of the coins that they were more willing to accept than other ones. And ones who were debased would tend to trade at a discount, at a lower value with the coins that people believed had their full amount of gold or silver in them. Now today, societies will claim, or they would designate some assets out there as what's known as legal tender. And so the money we use today has been classified by government as legal tender. And legal tender does not mean that people have to accept it as payment for goods and services. That's not what it means. Legal tender means that people have to receive it for payment of debt, public and private debt. So today, your Federal Reserve notes or legal tender. And so if you have a loan with your bank and you want to pay it off with Federal Reserve notes, they have to accept them. You might say, well, why would they not accept them? Of course they would accept them. Well, that's not always the case. When we first have currency with no ties to any gold or silver, which is what our Federal Reserve notes are today, then it kind of makes it more difficult for people to accept them. So no matter what lack of faith people have in your currency, as long as you know you can pay your debt with it, I can pay my taxes with it, I can pay my home loan with it, I can pay my car loan with it, my credit card debt, then it does make it generally more acceptable. Now, the second form of money we're going to talk about is representative money. And this is the first form of paper money. This is an asset, normally, again, in a paper form, that represents commodity money. So the key thing about representative money is that it represents the commodity. It can be redeemed, traded for commodity money. The first form of commodity money formed sort of by accident, you might say, and that was with goldsmiths. Goldsmiths are merchants or craftspeople, I should say, who make things out of gold. So they would make jewelry, cups, things like that. And they would have the facilities to protect gold. They would have some kind of a vault. They would have some kind of security system. And therefore, they would make a good place to deposit your gold. And so if you're a merchant in town and you had gold coins, you wanted to keep them safe, much safer to keep them at a goldsmith where they are protected by that security system. And of course, then you want some verification that your gold is at the goldsmith and they do owe it to you, they will give it back to you. Then you want to have some kind of proof of that, and that proof would be some kind of a gold receipt. So you would put your gold in the goldsmith, essentially deposit it, and they would issue a gold receipt verifying that you have X amount of gold deposited with the goldsmith, and that would be a legally binding contract. So let's look at a balance sheet. We're going to be using balance sheets in this chapter quite a bit. Those of you in this class who are business students, you know a lot more about balance sheets than I do. My balance sheets are going to be pretty simple. First of all, we have assets, and assets are things that you own. And the liabilities are your debts, things that you owe. And if your assets are more than your liabilities, you have what's called net worth. And net worth is put on the liability side because your assets, if you add liabilities to both sides, your assets would equal both your net worth and your liabilities. And we put it over on the liability side because the net worth would not be the ownership of the business, it would be under the ownership of the owners. So that's why in a corporation, you would put the net worth over here, and the net worth is not owned by the corporation, the net worth is owned by the shareholders. In my courses, in my examples, we're going to have very simple balance sheets, and I'm just going to forget about the net worth. Net worth doesn't add anything to our analysis, and so we're just going to have assets and liabilities. So let's say that you come in as a merchant and you deposit 10 ounces of gold into the vault, and that now becomes a liability to the goldsmith. It's over here. This deposit will be represented by your receipt. Once you give the gold to the goldsmith, it now becomes their asset over here. So they will treat the 10 ounces of gold as something they own. And that will be backed up, or that will be represented by the receipt you get for your deposit. So the receipt would represent an IOU. So they have the gold in the vault, and that's now their ownership. They own the gold, but they owe that 10 ounces to you, and the receipt is proof of that. And now you can bring the receipt back in to the goldsmith, hand the goldsmith the receipt, and the receipt would give you the 10 ounces of gold. Now, if the goldsmith would honor this over and over again, people would understand that, hey, these gold receipts, they're pretty good because the goldsmith always honors them. And probably came a point when a merchant was going to buy something, and they said, well, I got to run to the goldsmith, and I'll be back with the gold. And the person the merchant was going to buy things from said, don't worry about it. I'll take the receipt. I know the goldsmith is good for it. The moment someone takes the gold receipt as payment for good or service, it has magically become money. And once again, the goldsmith had a reputation of always honoring the receipts. These receipts would circulate as money. And then people would very rarely come in to actually withdraw the gold. Which meant also that we invented a new type of thing known as fractional reserve banking, which I'll get to later, that the goldsmith realized all this gold was sitting here. So you might have 10 ounces from this merchant, 20 ounces from that. You might have, I don't know how many ounces here. Well, if on a given week only about 10% of the gold ever gets withdrawn, then maybe you can start making a little extra profit and start loaning out this gold stuff. And that will become fractional reserve banking. It takes on a risk. If all the gold receipts come in at one time, then you don't have enough gold. But that's a risk you would take because, again, you can charge interest on these loans here, and therefore your assets, you would have some gold over here, and then you would have some loans as well, and these loans would pay interest. And that's when you started to get paper money to circulate, being backed by gold deposited at some entity, a goldsmith, and later on it would be a central bank or a private bank. Stop there.